Tell me, all of you, one other kind of overall question. Did kind of this series in a way just sort of come together as the first one that we looked at was yours, Michael. But then did people just sort of generally see other things were there, or was it a matter in the case of both you, David and Dionne, whether you just came upon this as you were in these countries? I think you were saying, David, you came upon the Russian presence.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Libya at the start of the uprising in 2011, and so I've continued to follow it even when most of our editors and probably our readers had largely lost interest. So I think like Dionne, I have a kind of feeling for and concern about the people of Libya.
Yeah.
So when a new superpower was treading over them in a new way, I just thought I would like to go and see that.
See that. Well, it all pulled together. It's a very powerful package in that sense. You get a feeling for what the Kremlin is doing and the various ways that they're doing it. So, and it's obviously something that's going to be with us for a long period of time.
If I could break in, we do have a question from a viewer. Beth Noble asks, well, first of all, it says, well done to the whole team. And the question is, to what extent did you go to the Russian authorities to ask for comment on these stories before they went to press? Assuming you did, how much did you reveal to them, and did they react? Was there reaction after publication?
I have an answer to that, and I also have a funny story that I can share as well about going to the Russians for comment. I text every time I have a story coming. I always text Putin's spokesman his name is Dmitry Peskov. He's been Putin's spokesman forever, and I text him to let him know that I have a story coming. And if I have any questions for him, I give him usually a sort of sentence outline of what the story is going to be about, and ask him sort of whether he comments, and he usually responds. If he responds at all, it says something like, oh, once again, don't come, don't. He usually is dismissive. Actually, he says, this is not a question for the president of the Russian Federation. This is a question for some other bureaucrat down the line. Which, of course, if you send questions to them, you get nothing. But I also, in the stories where I wrote about people and named names, I try to reach out to all of them. So the Madagascar story, I actually had spreadsheets with names and phone numbers, and in some cases email addresses of all the Russian operatives who were working in Madagascar. And I wrote and called and texted each of them several times, trying to get them to talk. But I usually don't reveal too much about what I'm writing about, because I was burned once. We did a big story. We broke a big story a few years ago about a massive Russian doping program in the Winter Olympics in Sochi, the Olympics that they hosted. And we had them sort of nailed on the story, and I went to them several days before, both the sports ministry and the Kremlin, and basically laid out point by point all of the accusations that we were making in this article, only to discover a few hours later that they had leaked this to TASS with their own spin on it, and basically, allowed them to do a story, kind of quasi scooping us, and sort of trying to undermine the story ahead of time. So I avoid doing that at this point.
Yeah, for each of ours, we sent questions and documented our findings, and in each case they referred to previous press statements, and it's kind of par for the course with them. Sometimes they'll use visual evidence to try to support their case and say, look, this hospital wasn't bombed. Bellingcat has the group that Michael mentioned earlier has a good sort of takedown of one of these refutations, where if you actually move the satellite image over and you show the other wing of the hospital, you can see that they did bomb it, but they're being very selective in what they're saying. And they also once our story came out, said not since World War II has Russia shared coordinates over open radio communications. And so first of all, they say we don't use open radio communications, and then they say not since World War II have we shared coordinates. But you know, there was the first day that we looked at, there were 21 targets with coordinates, and we're able to validate that by looking at satellite imagery to see that in fact all of these targets were hit. So it was, you know, you couldn't make it up, or you couldn't manufacture this evidence. And no response from Syria.
And I had sent through via our Moscow bureau, because I don't have any contacts for the Kremlin. They had sent a reporter in the bureau had sent an email asking for comment or a text or something, and they wrote back this very long-winded. First, they like castigated us for like having a reporter that wasn't well known to them, like not the bureau chief or something. I don't really understand. They even were angry about that, and even wrote Dean Baquet, the editor of the New York Times, about that, and then sent back this very long, winding response, of course, denying everything. And then because I'd asked them about some of the humanitarian, they had you know, injured or tortured someone, and allegedly, and they shot back with allegations about the French and said, you need to look into the French having sex with dogs in some particular region. I was like, huh, that's like not something I expected. But we chose not to include that in our story, that part.
That's the mark of a classic propagandist or PR person, deflection.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was not at all what I expected.
Yeah, no, that's not bad. Chad, are there any other questions?
We just had the one, and
Just the one.
we fielded it. Yep, thank you.
Well, I guess we're about roughly an hour. If anybody else has anything to say, go ahead. But otherwise, I just want to thank everyone for coming forward. It was a great, I'm not sure the word joy is the right one, but it was quite an experience to view and to read this entire project. All of it put together is a very powerful statement, and it comes across in multiple ways. So you're all to be commended for that. And I know how hard these things are, though I must say I haven't had to be in some of the places all of you have been in. But I think that even adds another layer to what a resourceful and great accomplishment this is. So I want to congratulate you all and thank you for participating in this, and I wish you well in all your ongoing endeavors. So,
well, thank you, Jim.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim, and thank to all of you. It was a really fascinating conversation.
great.
Thank you.
Thanks
Take care.
again.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.